Whitford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has declared his aim to secure an agreement of the G7 to vaccinate the world against COVID by the end of next year. But it's hard to see how he would have the brass neck to push such a proposal when the UK will be the only one in the room cutting overseas aid. The overall budget is being cut by a third, but COVID funding masks the drastic cuts to core projects. These include the health and education of women and girls, which the government claimed was a key policy, as well as humanitarian aid, HIV/AIDS, conflict zones, famine relief, refugees, and child education. And it's hard to believe the government thinks it's remotely reasonable to slash funding for water and sanitation in the middle of a pandemic. Even if funding is restored in a couple of years, the staff, researchers, experience, knowledge, networks, and infrastructure of many of these projects will have been lost. The Chancellor has justified the cuts because of the cost of the pandemic. But what does he think it's been like for low-income countries that were struggling even before they were hit by COVID? The UK is also hosting COP26, but any promises by the minister responsible will have little credibility, as when he was International Development Minister, he made commitments the UK has now abandoned. In 2019, he promised more than 100 million a year for the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, only for the funding to now be cut by an eye-watering 95%. The WHO has estimated that 80 million children are at risk from infectious diseases such as diphtheria, polio, and measles, due to the disruption of immunization caused by the COVID pandemic. So vaccination projects shouldn't face cuts. They need extra support to fund the necessary catch-up programs. We mustn't allow the re-emergence of polio and other infectious diseases to take a toll on the children of low-income countries. COVID is a global crisis and calls for a global response. So far, the international community has struggled to live up to its warm words of last spring. But the UK is alone in cutting aid at such a critical time. Low-income countries have received less than 0.5% of all COVID vaccines delivered so far. And the UK is one of those blocking the sharing of intellectual property and technology. This will prolong the pandemic for all of us and delay the economic recovery of low-income countries. But the UK government mustn't compound the problem by removing support from some of the most vulnerable in the world. While I support the call to restore overseas funding, I don't believe it can wait until next year. The COVID crisis is now.